The semi-official opening weekend figures for The Rise of Skywalker have just been announced. $175,500,000 is what it's sitting at. Now, as I said in my last video about the $90 million for the opening Friday, this is a fairly disappointing amount of money, but at the same time, $175 million for your opening weekend is pretty good for nearly any film. Okay, Avengers films probably wouldn't be too happy with that. Star Wars trilogy films probably not too happy with that either. But any other film would probably love a $175 million opening weekend. The $175 million is made up of $90 million on Friday, which is actually made up of $40 million on Thursday's advanced screenings, and $50 million on Friday, $47.5 million on Saturday, and $38 million on Sunday. Now, these figures are all just quote-unquote official estimates. They will be revised up or down a little bit, particularly Sunday's figure. Sunday has barely began in the North American market, so $38 million is what they say they will earn on Sunday, but that may be off by a fair amount of money. A day ago, Deadline had an article claiming a $193 million plus opening weekend, according to their sources. They've altered that article to now say $179 million plus, and that is still higher than the other official figures coming out right now. So still a little bit of fluctuation. Deadline was really accurate when Endgame was out. Their reporting was really good, but they've been a fair bit off so far for The Rise of Skywalker, so I'm a little bit hesitant to use their $179 million figure here. I'll use the more official $175 million. So let's take a look at the records. What does $175 million do for Rise of Skywalker? We've got Avengers Endgame way up there at number 1 all by itself, $357 million in the US market. If we go to number 12, we have Beauty and the Beast, $174 million. That's basically where Rise of Skywalker is sitting right now. Now, in about 24 hours' time, it might be revised up or down a little bit, but that's basically where it is. It is the 12th best open weekend ever in North America without inflation. If you put inflation on it, falls somewhere under the top 30, so I don't think it's quite number 50, but somewhere under the top 30 is where it sits if we actually put inflation on. The upper limits of the estimates where it could have gotten $220 million or more, which would have placed it at number 4. It's obviously fallen far, far, far short of that, nowhere near what The Last Jedi earned. But it has outdone Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, which is sitting right now on number 19. I guess that'll be pushed down to number 20 when Rise of Skywalker is put on the list. And it has $155 million there for its opening weekend. I believe with inflation it's around about $163 million, which is still less than this $175 million for Rise of Skywalker. So Rise of Skywalker, even with inflation, has outdone the non-Star Wars trilogy film, the standalone Star Wars trilogy film, Rogue One, which I guess is still good news that the trilogy films have still actually earned more money than the standalone ones, especially since they stopped making the standalone films because they weren't happy with how much money they made, although that wasn't really Rogue One, it was more the amount of money that Solo made. And I guess if you don't like Captain Marvel, there's a little bit of good news. Captain Marvel's been kicked out of the top 20. Captain Marvel's now the 21st best opening weekend in the US domestic market. Now there's another film on the list here that's interesting to look at. Number 8 is The Lion King. The Lion King got $191 million for its opening weekend, and it was released in 2019. So Avengers Endgame, obviously the biggest film of all time, it was also released this year. The second biggest opening weekend is going to go to The Lion King, and the Star Wars trilogy film is going to have the third biggest opening weekend of the year. Every other Star Wars trilogy film has been the biggest film of the year and had the biggest opening weekend. So that's just how far down this one's dropped. Again, number 12 is kind of good news. This isn't bad being number 12, but this should be right up the top. That's what Star Wars films have pretty much always done. This one really hasn't. It's not had a fantastic opening weekend. Still got to wait to see what its total box office will be, but it's obviously not going to be the biggest film of the year. Avengers Endgame will be. Is it going to be the second biggest film of the year? Well, that's The Lion King as well. So can it be The Lion King? That's going to be pretty tough. It may very well be the third largest film of the year. And again, all of the other Star Wars trilogy films, they're all number 1 in the year in which they were released. So we can take a look at the opening weekends for all of the Star Wars trilogy films. I've got them all listed here in order of release. So I've got Star Wars Episode 4 first, which was released in 1977. And we can see that the next film there, Empire Strikes Back, it has earned more money in its opening weekend. The blue bar has the actual figures, and the red bar are the inflation-adjusted figures. And it is very important to put inflation on for these films that are out in the 80s when inflation was running rampant, in, I guess, 1977 for the first film. Nowadays, inflation is very low, so it's not that big a deal to see if something's inflation-adjusted from 1 or 2 years ago. But huge differences when we put inflation on, which gives us a much more realistic target. But anyway, we can see for all of the Lucas films, each film beat all of the ones coming beforehand. And The Revenge of the Sith, it beat, obviously, Attack of the Clones. Now, if we look at the Disney trilogy, The Force Awakens beat The Revenge of the Sith. The Last Jedi did not beat The Force Awakens, and we can see that the Revenge of Skywalker, that's a film to go watch. The Rise of Skywalker did not beat The Last Jedi, and it's basically in a straight line down. So we can see the actual decline in opening weekends that's happened in the Disney trilogy. Now, we can put a good spin on it if we want to. We can still see that the Rise of Skywalker has outperformed The Revenge of the Sith in the opening weekend. Okay, it's not that far off if you look at the inflation-adjusted titles, but it has beaten it. So all of the Disney trilogy films have in fact had better opening weekends than all of the George Lucas Star Wars films. But they are declining down from where they were. That's not so much good news for the Disney franchise. If they were to release more, this trend may very well continue. And we can also add the other two Disney films, the non-trilogy films here, just to see how they stack up. We've got Rogue One sitting between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, that's where it was released, and Solo sitting between The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. And the first good news, obviously, for Rise of Skywalker is it has smashed the Solo opening weekend. Okay, Solo was catastrophic, Rise of Skywalker nowhere near there. But you can see that it's fairly close to Rogue One, particularly the inflation-adjusted total. So it has beaten Rogue One, but not by that much. So it's fairly close to that. It's a lot closer to Rogue One than it is to The Last Jedi. And so now that we have the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday figures, we can project out the rest of the week to see what might be possible. So this chart here has got the Force Awakens first week in blue, it has The Last Jedi's first week in red, it has a possible first week for The Rise of Skywalker in green, obviously the first week hasn't happened yet, and we have the first week for Rogue One in purple. And we can see that if it earns money at a similar rate to which The Last Jedi earned its money, and so far it is earning less than The Last Jedi, but if it earns it the same way The Last Jedi earned its money, it's going to barely beat Rogue One for the first week. So that's maybe what we're looking at. Again, it is just a projection, but again, if it earns money the same way that The Last Jedi earned its money and it stays on track like this, it's barely going to beat Rogue One for its end of first week total earnings. If we take a look here at the raw numbers that I actually used, again, I've just used the percents that the Last Jedi got for the figures that we don't have. If you look at the Rise of Skywalker, the third section there, we've got $40 million for the Thursday advanced screenings, we've got $50 million for Friday, we've got $47.5 million for Saturday, and $38 million for Sunday. They're the figures we know. So we had a reduction from Friday to Saturday of 5%. And if you look across at the other three films, they all had an increase. The amount of money they earned on Saturday was up from what they earned on Friday. So this is a little bit of a different way that this film is earning its money. It's not really sticking to what these other three films here actually did, and it's not good news. Normally films do earn more money on Saturday compared to Friday. Now if you look at the $38 million which they projected forward for Sunday, that's a 20% reduction from Saturday to Sunday. That's pretty much in line with what The Last Jedi did. It did a 19.8%. Okay, it's not as nice as what the Force Awakens did with its 11% reduction, but that's basically why I'm still using The Last Jedi for the rest of the projections out there, because of the 20% drop. So if it runs exactly like The Last Jedi did, it'll get a 58% drop to Monday, and then a 6% drop to Tuesday, and then a 16% drop, and then a 5.9% increase. So that's where the total for the chart is basically coming from. So it is very possible that it will outperform The Last Jedi's Monday figure. The Last Jedi got $21 million on its first Monday, where The Force Awakens on the left-hand side there, it got $40 million for its first Monday. So it is very feasible that The Rise of Skywalker may earn more money than The Last Jedi on Monday. In the Deadline article I mentioned at the start of this video, they actually do a fair bit of shilling for the film. They actually try to explain why their original estimates were out by so much. And they've basically said that on Saturday there was a lot of Christmas shopping going on, and that's why the Saturday figure isn't very good. But they've been told by their sources, which were wrong and somehow didn't know people would be Christmas shopping on Saturday, that the film will have a huge pickup after Christmas. So they're claiming that it's going to earn big money after Christmas, and it's going to go for weeks after that. And they're still saying that their industry sources claim $600 million plus in the US market, which will put it in line with what The Last Jedi got. Now, looking at the figures we have so far, just for the first weekend, doesn't look like it's going to get $600 million. So again, on Monday, we'll get our first idea if it's going to pick up and actually beat The Last Jedi or get $600 million. But right now, the figures we have here, $600 million looks like it'll be very difficult for The Rise of Skywalker to earn. In the international market, we've got $198 million reported so far. That won't be all the money for the first weekend yet. So right now, the total world amount is $373 million, but I believe it'll be higher than that for what its actual worldwide opening weekend is. But early estimates were for a $450 million opening weekend. It's got a little bit less than the US market, so it's going to be under 450, but I believe this 373, that's probably not all the money yet that has to be counted for the opening weekend. As far as the individual international countries go, most of them are looking pretty good. China's looking absolutely terrible though. The Last Jedi didn't do big things in China. Rise of Skywalker is somehow doing even less than that. If you look at these two charts here, the one on the left shows basically the opening weekends. We've got the blue line there for what The Last Jedi did, and the red line there is what The Rise of Skywalker did. Absolutely terrible comparison there. It's about half. So it's earned about half the money in China as The Last Jedi got. The right chart is basically the same thing, except The Rise of Skywalker was actually released a day earlier than The Last Jedi. So there's one extra day in its opening weekend, and it's still horribly struggling. So if we pull the line back to start at Wednesday, and the blue line starts on Thursday, you can just see how terrible the result is. So China, they don't care for this, but most of the other markets that like Star Wars, they're still going pretty good. So going forward, we want to see, will it beat The Last Jedi? It's looking tough right now. Will it beat The Lion King? Well, that's easier to do in the US market than it is internationally. And will it beat Rogue One? So I think they're the three main things to look at going forward. Only time will tell. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.